So I'm excited to talk today. I spend most of my time talking to people about how important performance is and how it impacts business and revenue. And obviously we've seen at this conference and many conferences now how true that is, and the data backs it up. But it's very easy for me as a vendor to go out and say, hey, you guys should buy my products and it's going to help you manage your performance and that impacts revenue, and give you the business case. But how do you actually execute on that? How do you get your company and your culture to buy in and really implement it? And so Nathan and Alfredo have already talked today, and I'm going to use my notes so I don't miss anybody's titles, but we have this great panel, and everyone up here has actually done that. They've actually taken the culture at their company and transformed it, as you've already heard a little bit of, and then Erica and Ryan will speak tomorrow, but they've transformed their culture to actually include performance. So we're going to talk today a little bit about how you make the decisions, how you actually get buy-in, and then how you maintain any progress that you make and you don't regress against it. So you guys have already heard Alfredo Lopez speak, and just as a reminder, he is Director of Engineering at Hearst Media Company. And then Nathan, who just spoke from Zillow, Senior Product Manager of Performance at Zillow. I love that title, by the way. I want to steal it. Erica Stanley is Engineering Manager at SalesLoft, all the way from Atlanta. And then Ryan, from all the way across the pond, Ryan Townsend, is CTO of Shift Commerce. So, as I said, you guys have all successfully actually embedded performance and quality into your organization. So I wanted to ask kind of how did you all get started? And Alfredo, I think we'll start with you on that one.
Sure. So I put my slides in order of how I achieve things, and I started with the executives, and I feel like all the different paths that I took, they all had its pros and cons, right? I think it depends on the organization. Like Hearst is not a tech company, so I feel like the last path that I took, which was focusing on our non-technical members, is the one that I should have started with. But that really depends on your company and who's driving the decisions. But when you identify what is it that each group cares about, for the executives, it's really easy. They're looking at the bottom line and profit, and that's why when I showed them the performance calculator, I could have just had that one slide, and they would have been on it. Like, I think I had like a 50 slide, and I spent a lot of time. They didn't care about any other metric. You could have even told them that the site was loading at 30 seconds. Once you show them that is money, then it's like, yeah, that matters. But then for product managers and designers is like, how fast can we get stuff out and make changes progressively? And for developers is to be kind of challenged, but at the same time supported by the tools, not to just get a million code review comments of your stuff is slow, and the GitHub also colors they're all red and kind of like you fail, and it doesn't help for developers to feel like, well, I'm doing something wrong, how can I make it faster, right? Yeah. So the more that we can put retroactive, a proactive focus on improving performance at the development level, the more that their developers are going to feel supported.
So who would you say is harder to get on board? Execs or developers? Or product, I guess.
I would say product, simply because it's the idea that, I feel like for me it was harder because I tried to embed it into the developers first, and development became slower because there were all this, once we put budgets, then you couldn't get your stuff in. You have to make sure that you refactor it and made it better, so everything slowed down. And when I proposed that we should be tackling performance at the inception level, product managers just thought like, well, now you're just moving that slow very early. So that was their concern. Yeah. So the idea of there are a million things to tackle in performance, you don't have to do it all at once.
As a product manager, I will fess up to that, yes. We don't like when things go out slowly. So Erica, you actually kind of went the reverse. You had engineering, or you felt like you should probably do engineering before you won over execs. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so So we actually made a very similar mistake in that we had a lot of performance initiatives kind of going and bubbling up through the engineering team. But what would happen is, middle of the quarter, all of our initiatives would get swallowed up by whatever was going on in product. And so we realized that we needed to get that product buy-in. And very similar points that you were making, they noticed that things were moving a lot slower. And our sell to them was, well, we can make sure that things move faster in the long run. If you give us this quarter to focus on performance, to focus on quality, we can make sure we can kind of attack some of that technical debt that we've incurred over the last few months, and actually make sure that we're building things faster. And then we can give you things not only faster, but in a more predictable way.
So time box it with product and engineering, and then take that whole proposal to the executive team.
Exactly. And once we had product and engineering kind of both speaking the same language, it was super easy. Because a lot of times the executive stakeholders could see the value very clearly in something that we were doing on the product side. It was going to make the product faster, it was going to make customers happy. It was hard to get them to see that that the quality side of things or the performance side of things was actually a part of that. And so that's something where we kind of started that whole culture kind of shift of thinking of performance as a feature. It's something that we've used a lot at the company.
Awesome. So once you get started, then, and this really goes to kind of what Nathan spoke about, so how do you go about collecting and analyzing the user data and then determine what actions to take? Do you want to kick us off with that, Nathan?
Yeah. I know there's many different ways to collect data. I know myself personally, we explored a lot of opportunities to collect and look at different RUM metric solutions and what different solutions offered. And then once we had some of that data, it was basically understanding where to start and what it meant. We collected a lot of synthetic data as well, but the RUM data was definitely more impactful and for us, giving the right perspective of where we needed to focus our time and our efforts. And then understanding how to apply that data that we had to make the right difference. Basically, focusing on the experiences that were the worst and looking at opportunity to improve those. But then at the same time, looking at how we might be able to use the signal in an automated way to capture things quickly. So as we're making as many changes as we do, and finding an effective way that we can set a realistic threshold that is not going to be just so noisy that we go insane by it. And something that we can simply quantify and have discussions during planning meetings as to, this is really bad, we need to spend some time on this, or hey, we're working up to a new release and we need to make some trade-offs relative to some new features that may not be as performant as we want, but we know it's the right change for the user.
Nice. And then Alfredo, you also have some experience in how you focus on those trade-offs.
Yeah, I feel like once you start gathering data, you're going to see that, the majority of your users coming from a certain device with a certain speed, and it's very easy to think like that's the group that you should focus on, but that's really not the way that you should think about it. You should focus on your slowest users, because a quick trap to get into is that you do a lot of work, and if the majority of your users are using high-end devices or fast speeds, you are not going to see that much improvement. But if you focus on tracking how that affects to really slow connections, the same change will have drastic implementation changes. So something on a desktop computer, you might just see a millisecond change, but to an Android device on a slow 3G, we're talking about seconds of difference of the same change. And it's really hard to not consider that, because you only see 5% or really slow percentage of users on that device, and you just focus on the majority of users, but that was not the right approach.
And I think one thing to take away also is, and that I've seen in the companies I work with, is that different companies have those key metrics that they make the trade-offs on. So you have to understand for your company what is the important key metric that you really want to be focusing on, and it's going to make the difference for your users. Awesome. So now you have the data, you've set targets, you have trade-offs. how do you actually build this performance into your culture? And Nathan, again, you guys have done a lot to really evolve that culture as well. So do you want to speak to the experience that you guys have had
Sure.
at Zillow?
Yeah. Aside from first learning where our measurements are, I think we set some base targets aside from any of the metrics that we collected, and we said, we know from industry, these are some of our expectations. We want time to first byte as this fast. We want to have this little of JavaScript. We want first contentful paint to be this fast, and we just set out, here's what our goals are, and we agreed as an engineering org about what those should be. And then we measure ourselves against them. But things happen differently once you actually see the reality of where your measurements lie. And like some of the data that I showed you, once you actually instrument the full end-to-end of some component, it can be really sobering what you actually see in the wild. Was there anything else I should add on that?
I think I can add to that. I've got kind of two perspectives in terms of performance culture. At Shift, I'm an executive, so given that I care about performance, I can kind of bully everyone in my company into caring about performance. But I deal a lot with kind of retail clients and advising them on how to build that culture within their companies. And a lot of what Alfredo spoke about in terms of getting executive buy-in and developer buy-in kind of really resonates there. And it's those intermediaries as well. It needs to be full kind of company from top to bottom. Everyone needs to kind of be aligned in those goals. Having visibility over the actual benefits of performance, it's not a project, it's not a one-off thing. Actually tying back revenue if you can do that, or some sort of metric that you run your business by, and making that visible to all people in that stack, whether they be the kind of bottom of the chain or the very top, is really important. And you'll start to see things like, rather than waiting until it comes into development and a department's like, oh, we're going to integrate this tool into our site, and they've already gone through all the vendor selection and everything like that. They've already picked the partner. Suddenly developers are getting brought into that because they're like, we know that performance is an important part of our business and the success that we're going to bring. So we need to make sure that the developers are involved because they know a lot more about the kind of nitty-gritty of performance than we do. So having kind of everyone aligned around that and having the kind of top-down kind of responsibility and the kind of pushing people to push back whenever someone says, oh, we're just going to throw this kind of thing on the site. Being able to say no as a developer without just being that kind of moody person in the corner that everyone hates, is really, really important. So.
I wanted to finish a little bit of my thoughts that I think I spaced on. Hitting targets is really important, and developing the culture around those targets can be challenging. But I know we take pride in some of the monitoring that we build and the monitoring that our developers use. And we like to have a signal on things on a very frequent basis. So as changes are happening, we have a very good feedback system to tell us that we've introduced something that's out of bounds. And we can specifically find within some minutes of time, ideally, who changed it and what changed. And then we can go have a conversation with them. And that's really hard to hold that line. And sometimes it doesn't always go over the way you expect it to because people have these things that they want to deliver. So integrating that in some of your processes and your systems to help support the culture can be tricky. But having some visual displays to show where the metrics are, we have some video monitors up that reflect on what the metrics are that those specific people care about. And the more often that they're looking at them, the more often they're talking about them during stand-ups and thinking about, hey, we're going to make this change, and they can visibly see that improvement. So that recognition and that understanding and seeing the metrics move in the right way is, I think, what I wanted to answer in promoting the culture in the business place.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think I want to also hear from Eric and Alfredo, but I know there's a talk tomorrow on performance budgets, and I think that's a great way to kind of have, once you decide what those metrics are, once you decide as a team what your trade-offs are, and then to your point, how do you hold that line once you've got that performance budget set that everybody's agreed upon? It's not just one person or a couple of people trying to hold that line. You get kind of everybody is already on board, and it's kind of an automated thing. So Erica, you had some comments on this too. Does your mic work?
Yeah,
Oh.
so it's working now. Maybe I just wasn't doing it right. User error. But something I wanted to talk about is that we are mentioning metrics a lot. But something that I found that was really important if you want this to really kind of permeate the culture is connecting the metrics to the why for developers. And so you mentioned in your talk kind of a lot of developers in the beginning felt like this was a decision made on high and it just kind of came to the team. Making sure that they feel empowered, to your point, to say no to things, to say, we decided as a product and engineering team that this was important to us. And so we need to focus on this even when there are other priorities that may come about from product, but also making sure that they understand why this metric happened or why we're focusing on this particular initiative. Something that we did in the beginning that we learned from is that we would just say, these are our new metrics for the quarter, have fun. And we wouldn't really help people understand why they were doing this. And another thing we had to connect it to is the behaviors we actually wanted to change. Not metrics for the sake of metrics, but actually like we want our team to do more of this. So we are going to measure this thing that is a result of that. And then we've started communicating it in, whether it was through our kind of product kickoff, product development kickoff meetings we have every quarter, through OKRs, but we also have kind of a engineering newsletter, a product and engineering newsletter that goes out every week. And we would talk about our progress on these initiatives. So it's top of everybody's mind all the time, like you mentioned, whether it's stand-up or whether it's your product planning meetings, really kind of making sure that it permeates everything that you're doing, all the decisions you're making.
So really focusing on that evangelism as well. And then Alfredo, you really worked on finding allies and sharing the responsibility. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so when I was talking about third party, and we use tag managers, which the goal of a tag manager is to enable everyone pretty much to just add code, right? And when you come into that contradiction that by doing that, you enable everyone to add code, and performance just goes out of the door, it's really tricky because I'm not there. I'm not even in the same location as these teams are doing this. And most of these tools don't either support, some of the techniques that we're talking about, like code splitting is just put JavaScript here and all loads at the same time. So finding allies on different teams is really critical because you're only one person, and even if you do have allies on your own team, it doesn't really matter when there are teams that are outside of your, structure making code changes.
What would be your best tactics? This is for anyone, I guess. I'm adding this in here. So what would be your best tactics on actually getting those allies? So the evangelism, the visualizations. Do you guys have any thoughts on?
I'm a little lost with that one.
I can say best tactics, as some of us have said before today, comparing to competitors or comparing against where we want to be and showing, in some cases, show how bad something might be is a great way to collaborate with others and get the right decisions made, or at least appropriate the right time to spend on it.
If I can say this also helps with negotiation when you have partners and you are paying someone to load something on your side and they're really slow. And if you are able to prove how much they are incurring on your own performance, you're able to negotiate a better deal with that partner.
Definitely, and establishing some SLAs with them. I loved also, Nathan, I loved your delighted, satisfied, and then just angry. So that would be another way, I guess, probably to get people on board. Like, people are just angry. So after you guys have, you've now evangelized it, you've gotten everybody on board, you've set your metrics, you've started to make progress. How do you guys actually go about measuring your success? So Erica, you mentioned, you guys have OKRs every month or key metrics that you're tracking. How do you choose those? How do you continue to measure that success and actually go, we've achieved this goal that we set out to achieve.
Right. So the engineering management team will get together and kind of talk about the things that they want to focus on for initiatives for the next quarter. And we'll start working on how do we actually measure progress, what is success for certain behaviors, and we'll start to kind of come up with metrics. And the metrics will kind of complement our OKRs. And what's really cool about the OKRs, and I know there's been a lot of talk about OKRs, and whether you're using them or not, what is really cool about them is that you can kind of see them roll up into higher level objectives and key results of, say, the leadership, the technical leadership, but then also the executive leadership. And so you can see directly how something a team is working on affects the larger company. And so it makes it very easy to evangelize it, but also to make sure that you're driving progress on it and that you're kind of making progress on each one of these metrics. And so, again, we're talking about that all the time. We're talking about it in our product engineering newsletter. We're talking about it at Stand Up. And so that really kind of drives every team to see what they can be doing to contribute to whatever that key result is.
Great. And Nathan, again, your talk also kind of spoke to some of this. So how do you guys at Zilg about actually measuring that success? Make sure those users are in that delighted category, not angry.
Well, obviously we want as many people as possible to have a great experience, a delighted experience. I know focusing on minimizing the angry experiences is probably some way to manage our time in an effective way. But understanding success is seeing the metrics trend in the right direction, and knowing that when we're delivering new features, that the new features are ideally proven out with some data, that we're making the right decisions for the user, and knowing that if we're making some trade-offs for the user to deliver something different that might not be as performant, that we can plan ahead and understand that we said we're going to come back to this and we made a trade-off. We're already over budget, but this is the right thing to give to the user, and we're going to come back and make this better. We just need more time to do it because we need to give this feature to the user now. So understanding that and being able to prioritize that, it's an ongoing thing. It's not part of, like was mentioned earlier, it's not the tech debt. It's got to be part of that 80% of dev time that you're putting it in front and center all the time, that's going to carry you with your metrics towards the success of your features.
So are you actually then scheduling that work in immediately subsequently, or getting it so that it doesn't then become technical debt?
As best as you can, technical. I know it's not really the right word to use for it, but it's as often as we can keep it front and center and make sure that we can have appropriate time to work on it. If not, work on it as we're building new features and understand how we can keep things as fast as possible for the user.
Nice. And then to anybody, Alfredo, Ryan, if you guys want to jump in, or if you guys want to add on, what methodologies do you use? So different types like synthetic, RUM, per budgets, like a little more detailed into kind of the methodologies you use to actually track that success.
So I think it's really important that you have kind of multi-stage testing as much as possible. So, if you can get things like performance budgets built into your pipeline, that's really valuable. And then you can do things like synthetic testing. Nathan mentioned competitor dashboards and things like that. And that's a great way to keep performance in the front of everyone's minds and not let it just be a one-off project where you're like, oh, we're going to optimize the site, and then suddenly all your competitors are faster than you because you've let things kind of rot away. If you keep that dashboard, everyone can buy into hating on their competitors. Whether you're in management or you're in development or you're in sales or marketing, whoever it is, you can all look at that chart and collectively get around the vanity of being faster than your competition. So that works really well. And then obviously the RUM part is really important. So kind of having those multiple stages is really valuable, and alerting on those different things as well. So making sure that if something does spike, you are going back around and addressing it.
And if I can add to that, is when you are comparing to competitors, it's useful to understand who your audience is and who your competitor's audience is, because it's not useful to just compare desktop to desktop or desktop to mobile if your competitors are putting more effort on their mobile because that's where their audience is, and yours are going to your desktop. it's hard to just do that one-to-one comparison. So you should not only compare the same device to the same speed, but rather where are the trade-offs happening and where the focus, because that's where the revenue is coming from. And it's hard, but those are the ideas that you should be comparing to.
Yeah, so make sure that you're knowing your users, and again, back to that, choosing the metrics that are right for you guys. Fantastic. Moving on to our last question. I can't believe we're already wrapping up here, but so last one, this is for everybody. We'll start with Ryan, and just we can go down the road. But so then, how do you maintain this success? So we spoke a little bit about the methodologies just now, but kind of adding on to that, like going out years down the road, how do you guys maintain this and keep everybody on board? You get new engineers that come in, new product managers that come in. I know we're so difficult. Execs that come in, obviously. How do you kind of keep this up and to your point, not get sidetracked on features and let competitors get ahead of you?
Well, like the kind of competitor dashboardy thing, I think the key thing is just visibility. If you are making money and you can track performance against that, that would be ideal. Anytime you get a regression, you'll probably see revenue drops off a little bit. So if you're having, daily, weekly reporting just out of automated tools that goes to everyone in different levels, then it's always there and present in front of people's minds. They can see that revenue figure. Depending on the structure of your business, you may not want to share that with everyone, but ideally, if you're open enough to do that, then people can literally see the effect that they're having. So anytime something gets faster, and your revenue increases, then that's going to give everyone that great feeling. And anytime something regresses, and it may be something completely out of control. I'm going to be speaking about third parties, and there's times when they just completely destroy performance. So it's not necessarily about blaming anyone for that decrease. It's more about how can we then proactively take steps to address it and then make that part of our culture, so that like I said before, if you can bring people into the vendor selection process, so you're picking performant third parties and things like that, that's going to improve that workflow for your whole company and keep that moving forwards.
For us, it's documentation, absolutely. Documenting the trade-offs, it creates that historical data that we're able to look back and be like, yeah, we made that decision on purpose because of this and that might change, but there's a historical value, so no one can come and say, why didn't you think of that? No, we thought about it, but we didn't do it because of this. Was it by design or a technical limitation or something else? And we're able to go back and say, this is something worth doing now. And we have actually ran across that, of things that didn't make sense to do 5 months before, but we've done other things that enable now that to be able to happen. And answer to that is when we're talking about performance budgets, it's always we're saying setting performance budgets, but they need to evolve with what your goals are. They're not supposed to be set in stone. Like I mentioned, like tech dev and trade-offs are just decisions that you're making today about tomorrow, and that is always going to change. So, and your performance budget should change with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that once you establish your performance budget, it's not set in stone. You should make sure that it stays up to date with your current goals and current user expectations too. Erica, what about you guys?
Yeah, so a few things. I really liked what you were saying about making reporting very transparent, also very accessible. So anybody can see at any time what's going on, and you have that documentation that you mentioned. Something else that we've done, we've actually created a performance team. We've been rotating architects and engineers. We typically pair an architect and an engineer on that team, and the whole architecture team is responsible for coming up with a performance backlog of things that we can work towards to really attack any performance issues that we see. But kind of getting that buy-in early from product really helped us here, because to tell product that you're going to take engineers away from building on features, product features, to focus on performance long-term was tough at first. But once they saw the value, it's something that we can actually use to kind of evangelize performance and performance-driven development throughout the engineering team, because again, it's rotating. So the same architect and engineer is working on it now won't be the same that's working on it 6 months from now. So everybody can kind of see it as this is something that we own. And then as far as kind of making sure that new people understand whatever the metrics are, whatever our initiatives are for this particular quarter, or just there are some metrics that we keep just long term. We make sure that in our engineering onboarding that we present all of this to any new engineers, any new product hires. So everyone knows going in, okay, this is a very data-driven kind of product and engineering team, and these are the metrics that they're focusing on.
Fantastic. So just continued, I like that it's part of onboarding too. And very lucky to have a focused performance team too. There's probably people out here that would like to know how you achieve that, so you could go ask Erica at the break. I see heads nodding. Nathan, how about you guys?
Developer education. They're the ones that are out there making the changes, making it great for the users, or maybe building something that might not be the best choice, and maybe they just didn't know about it. So I teach 2 classes to developers, user UX monitoring and services monitoring, and those are great ways that I think any developer needs to understand how to measure what they're building and understand if they're improving it or making it similarly worse. So continuing on that, helping everyone understand what the goals and targets are, being transparent about that, and helping them know that they're contributing to the end goal of making a great product, and that they have a chance to see the success in the metrics and the things that they're measuring. And then in addition to that, I like to share monthly measurements that everyone can see how we're doing. It doesn't have to be everything. There's a lot of metrics that we can measure from a performance perspective, but if you can narrow it down to the things that really matter, and you can display it in a very simple way that everyone's going to understand, you can understand very specifically if your KPIs are going in the right direction, or if maybe you need to put the brakes on and make some adjustments or otherwise. So communication, being transparent about the metrics, and having those regular communications and discussions about them is great to keep up success.
Yeah, so communication is key. Seems like having meaningful metrics. I like, Ryan, you mentioned alerts. I didn't want to let that, you slid that one in. That's a great one as well. I think having alerts that, different levels of severities and visibility is very important as well. So before we wrap up, any last words of wisdom from you all, are success stories for everything that this conference is about? So any last thoughts?
So something that just came to mind just as you were kind of calling us success stories is that this is a work in progress. This is something that has to be kind of a living, breathing thing. And you can't say that, for instance, one of our metrics was getting AppDex to 0.80 or something like that. Even if you hit that, you still have to be constantly working on that. And so helping everyone understand that this is something that we'll always be working on, we'll always be looking to improve, I think is key.
Definitely. And I think it's a testament to everybody that's here at the conference that's continuing to work. I know everybody comes to these conferences year over year, and the topics evolve and change, and speakers evolve and change, so it's fantastic. So we will be around at the break. Again, I'm so sorry I don't have the slide with everybody's Twitter handles, but they are on the website, and definitely take advantage. You've got executives, product managers, engineers, so ask them if you have any more questions about how they actually achieved success in getting performance as part of a culture in their organization. Thank you all again. Enjoy the break.